to set up high-profile intrigue on this show.
Okay, we're off. Back to business today. No more jukebox till the weekend. Back to the business.
For this, it was just you ask whatever you like, and it left him terribly exposed.
Now, this song is a song that Lisa and I have been performing together for quite some time. I don't remember when I recorded this, but since I've recorded it, Lisa and I have been performing. So there you are. It's a rather pretty little tune, and it's called Angels. Oh, just like Ricky Man. I'm sorry, I just turned into Rolf Harris. Hang on. I think that little blue pill I just gave me just before I came on started to work. All the blood's rushed to my nose. Most of you shouldn't have got that joke.
Hi Marty, good to see you, sis. This Wormwood looks good. You should watch this. It looks good. I haven't seen it yet, but
You take the end and let me go. Oh, clear up the line. Where we be? How is it done? Two into one, so easily. Lifted up by angels, higher than the world, strong enough to live it, down to love and sleep, can't judge another. Lifted up by angels, you understand. Yet never say how every man, oh, every man fades away. If not for love's ashes to dust, water to rust away. Lifted up by angels, higher than the world, strong enough to live, down to love and sleep, can't judge another. We're close enough together. We're better than rain. The darkness still not reaches. Let the angels deep on the love and faith.
Okay, this Wormwood Prophecy, Tom Horn's only just released it. He's got a book on it, but he's done a video as well. So we'll check it out. I haven't watched it either yet, guys. I've got two. A quick one. Where is it? No. Yeah, like videos. Hang on. Yeah, that's it.
If Nando's chicken gets its legendary flavour by marinating in peri-peri sauce for 24 hours.
Coming to you from the HagmanReport.com studio, located in the Keystone State, birthplace of a mighty nation. It's your host, Doug Hagman. Welcome to Hagman. It is the Hagman Report, where truth can't be silenced. Websites for the truth include HagmanReportLive.com. That's HagmanReportLive.com. There you can download all of our programs, both the entire episodes as well as the popular segments. HagmanReport.com there for show prep materials and such. Oh, just as I sit back and sip the roast, the absolute final batch or the final formula for Detective's Choice Coffee. I'm sitting back. It's just waiting for the recipe, or the roast is waiting for my approval / signature. And I think we've got it. I think they've got it just right. Just enough caffeine, just enough. The wisp of cherry blossoms and sweet cocoa. Oh, just the wisp. That's soon to be coming. Soon to be coming. Maybe as early as next week. Oh, anyway. Today, the 21st day of November, 2019, we saw, of course, again, throughout the day, this clown show of an impeachment. This coup. Yes, the coup is being televised on your television. We saw it, didn't we? What a theatrical, Emmy-winning performance today. Isn't it interesting how yesterday there was a 5-minute break just so the coup plotters could announce or engage with the media? Yeah. Meanwhile, in the background, Biden and partners received $16.5 million in payments stolen from the Ukraine. This according to one of the members of Parliament. But let's not talk about that. Eric the Tech, how are you doing this day?
Great.
Yeah, I look. I know you're like busy as heck. Do we have our guests?
I'm working on it because Global Star is down, so I'm trying to.
Okay. All right. So you want me to stretch? Is that what that means? Okay. Just let me know. Pop in with your melodious voice. Let me know. I'm so glad to be with you. Let me serious things up a little bit, but I am serious about the coffee. Next week, perhaps we're going to launch. I believe it's going to be next week. We're going to be launching our coffee.
I'll go out of my way to buy it, mate. You can bet it.
The Patriot Blend, the Revolution Blend, and the Detective's Choice. Now the Detective's Choice Dark Roast. Yes, Dark Roast with a little kick of caffeine, and again the sweet cocoa and cherry blossom aftertaste. So it's good for those long stakeouts, surveillances, or just to get your mind right for the next interrogation, interview, or whatever you gotta do. I'm telling you, I'm just sipping, and I'm about ready to put my signature on the approval slip for the blend. It only took about 6 months to get it right, to get it perfect, because nothing that comes out of this office is going, if it's not perfect, it's not going to come out of this office, this platform. And that's my story. All right. Now, I think we've stretched that out enough, right? So, without further ado, I want to introduce, of course, again, my good friend, my colleague, Mr. Steve Quayle, SteveQuayle.com. And there, folks, please let me tell you something, okay? If you're not a member of the Q Files 2.0, if you're not a member of the files behind the Q Files or the that particular pay site, oh, you've got to, man. Some of the information there is just, it'll blow you away. He's going to superintend the discussion we're going to have with Tom Horn from Skywatch TV, and the author of the latest book, The Wormwood Prophecy. I read this over the weekend, and I got to tell you, this last weekend, I've got to tell you something. It was hard to put down. There was so much behind it, so much contained within two covers. So we're going to be talking about a number of things, including the Wormwood Prophecy. But right now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce and essentially turn over the dais to Mr. Steve Quayle. Steve, how are you, sir?
Hi, Doug. Can you hear me now?
We can. Yes.
Okay. And you do have Tom on also, correct?
We are
here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
There we are.
This is obscure. This is what I would call radio obscura in sort of a way. But Doug, today we're going to talk about Wormwood, the prophecy that Tom Horn has put out his book on. But this is so pertinent. I want everybody to put into their mind and their memory banks recall and hit it the recall mode, because obviously when Tom and like Chris Putnam were dealing with Exo Vaticana, they took the world by storm. And now we're entering into a stormy world. And once again, and Tom, I'll turn it right over to you, but Tom and I never coordinated. I had no idea he was doing Wormwood, nor did he have any idea I was doing the intersection of the asteroid called, what do they call it, Umau Mau Mau, or whatever, kind of like the old 1963 song, Papa Umau Mau. So it's fascinating once again that, and I think people need to understand this, God always wants a second witness, gives a second witness, and this is critical. And Doug, for the record, why this is pertinent is prophecy is God's way of warning his people what's coming, so that they don't, so that they're not, number one, destroyed or taken off guard. So Tom, go ahead and just talk, and when you need a break, give it back to me, because I think this is one of the most incredible revelations, and the time is now upon us. We're not talking about something that used to be talking about the days will come. The days are now here, and even the events leading up to Wormwood's destruction of a third of the earth, especially the waters of the earth turning bitter, I think it's critical that people understand. So Tom, go ahead and just, me, give it full bore, both barrels of shotgun at once, because this is that critically important at this time on the day we are in November.
Yeah, can you hear me, Doug?
Yes, we can. I apologize for that delay, but yes, I want to make sure that we had our EQ right in the tech room there. So yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great, wonderful. Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Doug and Steve. And the other thing, Steve, I did not know.
Hey, Bruce, good day, mate.
A part of the asteroid belt that could be connected even back to the Old Testament, where Rahab, the planet is destroyed, and the wandering serpent is driven from there. And I'm looking forward to everything you're going to say about that. I also did not know that your next conference, which is coming in the summer of 2020 in Branson, Missouri, I did not know that your conference was going to be on catastrophism. So it's amazing how God once again brought me and you to the same area of revelation. So obviously, I'm talking about the Wormwood prophecy. For those few out there that might not know what I mean when I use that term, it's taken out of the book Revelation, chapter 8, 10, and 11, where it says this. It says, "And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star," and that Greek word star is asteroid, "from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. End quote. Now, we can get into what I think some of that is talking about here in a little bit, but for me, I really need to explain why all of a sudden 2019 this becomes something of extraordinary interest to me, this prophecy, and why I believe that it is soon going to be fulfilled within 9 years, and we'll talk about that. But for me, this started with a familiar metaphysical experience that I have only maybe one time ever before even mentioned in the public. But it's something that has happened throughout my lifetime. And let me just quickly explain this. Years ago, when I was a very, very young Christian, I was just so passionate and hungry, wanting God to use me in ministry, and was praying every single day, literally begging God, if you know what I mean by that when you're a young Christian, begging Him to allow me to be in ministry. And I came home from work one night and went to bed, and the very next thing I know, I'm standing in front of a very brilliant light. Now, somehow in my mind, I knew that I was standing before God. I also somehow knew that He had told me some things, but then He had said it was time for me to go back and that I would not remember. And I recall vividly to this day saying, but Lord, please don't let me forget. Please don't let me forget. And at that moment, I started falling backwards. It's just as if I had fallen out of an airplane with my back towards the earth, and I'm falling through space very quickly. I can see the brilliant light, and everything that I had just been before is moving away from me very quickly. And then all of a sudden, I saw the roof of my house literally go around me, and I landed on my bed with a thud. And immediately I sat up in my bed, and now I was no longer in a dream state, a night vision, but I'm awake, and I'm sitting there. I took in a deep breath, like that, and I'm sitting there trying to kind of collect what just happened, right? And then I heard my young wife, Nita, sobbing, and I turned and I looked, and sitting across the bed from me, Nita was sitting there, and she had been weeping. In fact, she had been bawling to the point that it took her a few moments to collect herself. And I kept saying, what's the matter, babe? What's the matter? And finally, when she could collect herself, she told me how that she had woke up in the middle of the night. This around 2 a.m. This always happens around 2 a.m. And she had found me dead. I didn't have any breath. I had no pulse. I had no heartbeat. And for 15 minutes, she had been aggressively trying to resuscitate me. She didn't really know how to do it, but she was beating on my chest, breathing into my mouth, and I was completely gone. While I was standing in front of a brilliant light somewhere, this is what she was experiencing in our bedroom. Now, this was a long time ago. There were no cell phones. We didn't even have a rotary phone. We lived in the country with no near neighbors, and so she was just bawling her eyes out, trying to figure out what was she going to do. She was going to drag me to the car maybe and try to get me to a hospital, when all of a sudden I came out of it and I woke up. Now, the next day, I went to my pastor, and I told him what had happened. And you guys know that text in the New Testament that says not to cast your pearls before swine? Well, I'm not saying that my pastor was a pig, but he totally did not get what I was talking about. He thought that maybe I had just ate too many chili beans or something before I'd gone to bed. And what that did to me as a young preacher is it made me kind of conceal everything and just close it all up. Not share this with nobody other than my wife, of course, was aware of it. And because I don't know, I just didn't want people thinking that, I had had a hallucination. I knew this was something different, but it totally did not make sense to me at all. What was on my mind every single day was, why would God have shown me something sense to me at all.
To remind you later
I pray
on.
about it every single day. Now, at that time, for the first time in my life, I happened to be reading through the Bible book by book. I had never done that before. And I happened to be in the book of Job, and about, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks after this event had taken place in my life, I'm reading through the book of Job when all of a sudden my eyes fell on Job 33:14 through 17, and this is when Logos became Rhema. The Word of God literally came alive and jumped off the pages at me. And here's what it says there. It says, quote, verse 14, "For God speaketh once, yea, twice, yet man perceives it not. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instructions, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man," end quote. And I got to tell you that even as a young preacher, not trained in any kind of theology, I immediately understood what that text was saying. It spoke to me in such powerful ways that God had done exactly what this text says. That during the nighttime, he had sealed information and instructions and the rest of it within me, but he was not going to let me remember, just as he said. Why? This text even answers that. Two reasons. It says that he may withdraw man from his purpose. You guys both know that as a young preacher, if God had allowed me to look into the future and see where I would eventually wind up today, the privilege of getting to know people like Doug Hagman and Steve Quayle, doing television, doing radio, publishing books, doing all this stuff, what would I have done? I would have immediately aimed at it, and I would have been doing everything I could to make that come to pass, to make that happen. That would have been my purpose, from which, according to this text, God withdrew me from. Why? Well, because he knew I needed to go through the school of life, right? I had to suffer trials. I had to go through all kinds of experiences that would then qualify me to be able to do the job that later I would be doing. And then the second part of verse 17 says, "and to hide pride from man." So again, as a young preacher, if I had seen where I would someday be, I would have been tempted to be lifted up in pride, perhaps. I don't know if I would have or not, but I would have been tempted to be, and to think of myself as more than I should. Now, why am I telling you this story that the vast number of people have never heard me describe before, certainly on the Hagman Report? In fact, I think I only ever talked about this once before on Sid Roth's Supernatural. I'm telling you that because from that time until today, on a very few occasions in my life, I've gone to bed never expecting anything. I couldn't make this happen if I wanted to. It just happens when he wants it to. I will go to bed, and then during the night, something happens. The New Testament, by the way, uses a Greek term called ecstasia. It's the same term when it refers to Peter, where it says he fell into a trance in the New Testament. It's the same verbiage that the Apostle Paul says that, he was caught up into the third heaven, whether he was in the body or out of the body, he did not know. It's that same thing, I believe, that is happening, where all of a sudden I will be in a highly vivid, three-dimensional, full-color, panoramic revelation. And it's something that is coming out of that information that God originally sealed within me. But it is more real to me than this matrix that we live here in our 3, or if you add time 4-dimensional reality with our natural senses of touch, feel, taste. This is something so far beyond that when I come back, the world to me feels like I'm somehow in a clam. I mean, everything's closed in on me and tight. I'm not allowed to perceive the fullness of revelation. But in this other place, it's there. Now, during those times, I have seen things that when I wake up, always around 2 a.m., I've written down, and those things have always come to pass just as I've seen them. Now, my son Joe, you guys know him, as honest as the day is long. he would tell you that he recently found an old letter that one of the nights when this happened, I woke up, I wrote all this stuff down, even involving the death of the young man and other things. And he came to me ashen faced and he said, "Oh my gosh, Dad, I just found this old letter." He said, "Look what you wrote. Look what you said. Everything on this happened exactly the way that you said it was going to." A better example, actually, that most people do know about, and Steve kind of referred to when we opened this program, was late in 2010. Once again, I went to bed. The next thing I know, I'm somehow elevated. I don't know if I'm on a mountaintop, I don't know, but I'm elevated. And I'm looking down over St. Peter's Square and the Vatican City. And I see these ominous dark clouds that are starting to rise up over the Vatican City. There's something I can't explain to this day. There's also a hum in the background. It's almost like a giant engine or a motor or something somewhere is running. And I have no idea what that means, but that tone is there. And when I woke
Hey, you!
up,
The tablet crashed. I had to wait for it to reload. How are you? Good to see you back, sis.
The 16th is going to resign in April 2012. Now, if you remember, in late 2010 and early 2011, Chris Putnam and I began research on, and we wrote the book Petrus Romanus, which shook up a lot of people. In fact, the media is still talking about it. The UK ran a major article on it last week. But I remember telling Chris Putnam what I had saw and that I wanted to talk about it publicly, and he was really worried about it. He thought, "Man, that's very specific. You're going to say Pope Benedict's going to step down in April of 2012. You're going to predict that? I mean, if that doesn't happen, then it could create all kind of, grief and negative feedback around our work." But I did it anyway. So I think I talked about it on Hagman and Hagman. I was on Sid Roth's Supernatural in 2011, Jim Baker 2011, Prophecy in the News 2011, and I made the prediction. I believe that Pope Benedict XVI is going to resign in April of 2012. Now, here's something interesting. 2012 comes and goes, and it does not appear that Pope Benedict had
New. It's a week old. It was done on the 21st of November this year. It was done about a week ago. That's why I put brand new on it. No one's heard this as far as I know.
resigned. And I started getting all this trolling, all this negative email from a lot of Catholics, including, saying, "See, you don't have no clue what you're talking about.
Jay-Z, g'day, bro."
All that. And of course, that had been true for over 500 years. No pope had resigned in over 500 years. So I really went out on a limb making this prediction. But then what happened? February 28th, 2013, the Vatican announces that Pope Benedict XVI has retired. He has resigned. He is stepping down.
Yeah, he hasn't got to it yet, New Creation or Jay-Z. He's just giving a background now. So you haven't missed anything.
Gave an interview to the New York Times, and people can Google this and read it for themselves. And in that interview with the reporter from the New York Times, the Vatican admitted that Pope Benedict XVI had actually officially resigned in secrecy before the Roman Curia when he returned from a trip in April of 2012. Exactly what I had been shown. And so my phone lit up. People everywhere, CNN including, wanting me to come on their program. How did you know this? Who's your insider at the Vatican? And once again, I just knew that if I tried to even explain what I have just now explained on the Hagman report, that they absolutely wouldn't get it. They would think I was lying. They would think that I had some insider at the Vatican, because this was information that nobody else anywhere else had. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because early this year in 2019, this happened again. And this time, what I saw was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. And I wasn't just surrounded by terrified people in this vision, this night vision. I myself was terrified by what was happening, what was coming upon the earth. My heart was literally failing me for fear, to use a New Testament axiom. And now I can't on this program, but I'm willing to come back in January and do it. I can't provide all the details of what I saw because I promised Sid Roth that I would not do that until I'm on It's Supernatural with him in January. But I can tell you this, that words really cannot capture the ominous sense of what was unfolding. But it started with what at first I believed was this very large two-horned fiery dragon, deep in the heaven, undulating, moving quickly towards the earth. And then my point of view changed, and I was up above it looking down, and I realized that it wasn't a dragon. It was an enormous space rock. And as it was racing towards Earth, the way it was turning as it was moving through space, and the way the light of the sun was cast upon it, it gave it the appearance that it was moving back and forth and racing towards this planet. Now, I'll jump to the end of it, and again...
Yeah, that's what he said, Jay-Z, on Sid Roth.
For that matter, if people get the
January next year. I'll keep my eye open for it.
When they read in the book where I start saying, imagine a large dragon in the deep heavens, when they read that, they'll read exactly what it was that I saw. So they can know it before January anyway. But when I saw what I did,
it's worth the price of the. Tom, I didn't mean to interrupt, or I don't mean to interrupt, but yet I do. It's worth, folks. Let me tell you something. Just be prepared. Brace yourself. It's great. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, so you've read it, and if you recall in the book when I say imagine a dragon, you've read basically what I saw. It's kind of the meat on the bone kind of thing.
Yes.
What I saw. But then, and by the way, in the book, I don't explain all of these different details because I did not want the book to be based on Tom Horn says he's had a vision. I wanted it to be based on the facts, the data, what some of the other people who join me in claiming that NASA is involved in the cover-up, what they are saying. So I wanted to put those kind of stats in the book, knowing that publicly I could talk about these other details that can kind of fill in the line. But the bottom line is this. This was, without doubt, nothing like I've ever seen before even comes close to the gravity of what I saw and how I felt. And when I came awake, I almost fell out of bed. I was in a cold sweat, and I sat up in bed, and it was as if something whispered in my ear. I don't know that that's exactly what it was. I'm not saying that, there was like an angel. I'm not saying anything. But I'm saying that the way my brain received it was something whispered in my ear, one word, and that was the word Apophis. And I wrote it down.
Apophis.
Now, I knew that there was an ancient Greek chaos dragon, a demon. Not Greek, Egyptian. I knew that, but I really didn't know anything about it. I also knew that NASA had named an asteroid Apophis, but I didn't know anything about that either. And so when I got out of bed, the first thing I did was I went to my computer and I started doing research on the asteroid Apophis because that is what I had saw. So, why NASA named this asteroid after an Egyptian god of destruction and chaos, we can all speculate about why they did that. But the bottom line was I was more interested in the physical asteroid and learning the details and the information about it. And so just quickly here, and I'll let Steve jump in. What I found that very morning, actually, I went online and I discovered that this asteroid had been discovered in 2004. And in the beginning, they saw it as a real threat. A real Earth impact potential, near-Earth object, NEO. The NEO-wise team, NASA, they all thought that this has a high probability of impacting the Earth. And then they changed their opinion, and we can get into why I think that happened. But I discovered the diameter of this asteroid is approximately 370 meters or 1,200 feet across, or in other words, It is about the size of 4 NFL football fields side by side. It weighs an estimated 20 million metric tons. It is traveling at 28,000 miles per hour, which is just a mind-bending mass and potential inertia velocity encounter that most people can't even begin to fathom. If it does impact the Earth, now, by the way, NASA changed their calculation. We can get into why we think that happened. But even then, they are still saying that Apophis is going to come so close to planet Earth in 2029, that it is going to knock out the satellites that are in our space. So we're talking about a monster. They say it's going to be vivid even during the daytime hours. That you'll just be able to look up and see this giant mass passing by Earth. But they also say that if it does impact the Earth, it's going to, their mapping tech or calculations tell them it's going to come close to the coastlines of California and Mexico, so a really highly populated area. And if it hits the Earth, the impact is going to unleash the equivalent of a billion tons of TNT, or to put that into better perspective, an explosion larger than nearly all nukes on Earth today, or again, to put it into perspective, an explosion larger than 65,000 of the Hiroshima bombs, the Hiroshima nukes. And so tens of millions, if not billions, of deaths are going to be experienced from the initial impact, as well as years of climate disruption and all the stuff that they go into with regard to what's going to happen if Apophis, if it does impact the Earth, which I might as well just cut to the chase and tell you, in my opinion, it is going to, and NASA is involved in a cover-up right now because they fear the kind of chaos and stuff that could lead to the imposition of martial law once people know that this thing is coming and there is no way to stop it. In fact, I think one of the reasons, in my mind, why they named it Apophis was Apophis was known to be a demon god of chaos that could not be stopped. And I personally think that that is the reason why they hung that name on this asteroid.
Well, and I want to chime in on that, Tom. And one of the things, interestingly, about, and I never knew this, Tom, and you know, I think I heard you share that one time about your supernatural experience. And here's something, ladies and gentlemen, I think people need to really pay attention to. Concurrently with what Tom was doing on Apophis, I've been dealing for the last couple of years, as many of you know, of the planet Rahab. It's gone by the name of Phaeton. It's gone by the name of Astra. But it was a planet that was between Jupiter and Mars, where the asteroid belt is now. When Tom sent me an article, I said, Tom, the intersect point of Oumuamua, or Oumuamua, that's what they call it, like Papa Oumuamua. That's the way I can even put it into my terms. I may be mispronouncing it. I said, Tom, its intersect point with the orbit of the asteroid belt, in essence, its dead center, where all of the, if you will, the mathematical positioning of this Luciferian planet that was destroyed is. And then I made the statement, Tom, they're coming back to that area where they left. So the question is, did they have forewarning, they, the fallen angels, that this was going to happen? Now, here's where it gets really wild. I want people to understand this. Some of the scientists who are far from Christian, even SETI scientists, and these guys are bright guys. I reached out to a brother in the Lord who's very, very smart. I mean, that's an understatement. Called, you know, obviously when you graduate from engineering school at 8 years old, you're a prodigy. Advanced mathematics, he came from a history of really bright people, especially in the particle acceleration field. But I sent him an email, And I said, here, listen, I call him Doc, Tom, and Doug. I said, Doc, here's what I want you to check. I do not have the ability to do, if you will, orbital physics and regressions. I do not have the ability to check asteroid strikes and impacts. There are 191 craters on the Earth. 60 of them are in North America alone. But I said, here's what I want. I want you to run regressions for me. At least I know that word. And this, Tom, God put in my heart when I was in the shower. I know people give me a lot of grief about that. But when I first got launched on this, the Lord himself gave me a vision of the entire future.
Pat, it's a handle of a walking frame. I've got it sitting up on Mum's walking frame. Let me get it. So, how do I do it?
Doesn't that sound like what happened to you too?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do I do
Tom
this
and I never
without
knew
showing
each other,
that?
ladies and gentlemen, what, 20 years ago? But now here's what's important.
Doesn't really matter, I
There
suppose.
is argument and discussion.
It's not a microphone. It's the
who now
brakes.
is under intelligent design, based on the intersect point, based on chance, based on asteroid deflection, one hitting the other, etc. That thing has been parked, and they claim that it's left, but it's parked in a, how would I say this, almost a geosynchronous orbit, and there were other, if you will, attendant ships, if we're going to call that. And so I want to read something, and Doug, and this is on space, and I'll put it up, or I'll send it to you guys to put up on, your show today. But the planet Phaeton died because of a nuclear war. Phaeton in Greek mythology, one of the sons of the sun god, and basically came too close to Earth and was destroyed. Bottom line. And here's this one parable that I think, not parable, paragraph. Says this: in times immemorial between Mars and Jupiter, there was another planet split into parts as a result of some kind of cataclysm. Now in the place of its former orbit, there's a belt of asteroids. The echoes of that cosmic catastrophe have been preserved in the traditions of many peoples, in particular in the ancient Greek myth of Phaeton. Many scientists, ufologists, esotericists, science fiction writers believe that a highly developed
Phaeton, I'm pretty sure that's who Thanos from the Avengers Endgame. I'm pretty sure that's who that is. Thanos.
civilization.
I'm telling you guys, the Avengers, they're predictive programming. Avengers 2, the villain was an AI and he was a robot, which is the image of the beast. And there's a lot of biblical references in it. Very, very predictive.
First on Phaeton. Now, fast forward. One of the last things that Greg Evenson, who was in our Space Force, told me, and I don't know, Tom, I think you heard this, but that he was literally over the northern pole of Mars facing the asteroid belt. And he said, Steve, we got so low and we were scanning, it was like a field of giant broken diamonds. He said it wasn't frost, it wasn't snow. It was like broken crystal, giant shards, I guess would be the word to use. And instantly I said, Tom, I said, Greg, Tom, I'm talking to Tom now. I said, Greg, that's Lucifer's throne, the absolute, if you will, leftovers of Lucifer's throne when it was on Astra, the planet Phaeton, etc. So what even gets more interesting, now here's the bottom line, Doug and Tom. I reached out to my science friend, and he's running supercomputers, and the guy designs and builds them and has been building some of the fastest ones that even we don't know about, even beyond the words that we're familiar with, quantum computers. And so I said, here's what I want you to do, Doc. I want you to, run the regressions of the angular deflection, in other words, the angle that the asteroids hit the Earth, the relative velocity, and I said, I want you, if you can, to give me a time frame. And obviously, everybody looks at them and says they're this old, they're 600,000 or a million years. And I said, I want you to tell me what that data is pointing to. And here's what he said. I'm going to read it. This is so mind-boggling. Understand, I'm not trained in physics. I flunked geometry. But the concept of what's going on around here, it's a gift from the Lord. You can argue with me. You can tell me you're smarter than I am. Yep, you probably are. But here's what God had Doc give to me. He said, Steve, now this will blow your mind, Tom. The raw data indicates that the chunky rock sections of the planet, which was destroyed, came and hit aka landed on the key.
Loading problems, that's unusual. We'll try it this way first. No, I'm going to do it that long way. It picks up where we left off, so there's no problem. Very interesting, guys, and it's only like just over a third of the way through.
Go Pro with the new Oral-B Genius AI, equipped with motion sensors and powered by artificial intelligence. It recognizes your brushing style, so it's easier than ever to brush perfectly every time. Oral-B, brush like a pro.
The key satanic spots in the pre-Adamic time based on the size and shape of the craters in the earth. The initial but yet not confirmed backtracking, and please note, the orbital position of the craft now is precisely, we're talking at Mao, where the planet was when it was destroyed back then. Looks like his...
Thanks anyway though, Pat. I just thought I'd have a bit of a chuckle.
The same location, so we can watch what happened now. And you know, Tom, there's nothing new under the sun. That which was will be again. But I think that here's the hardest thing, and I'm going to turn right over to you now, Tom. Here's the hardest thing I know, and you're struggling with to do it. And obviously, I have not read your book, so I want everybody to know that to describe an unparalleled destruction, to describe the frame of reference that no one can even put into, you can go into imagination, science fiction, but when you're literally silent before the Lord, when your breath is taken away from you, and this is why I don't think some people recognize when there's silence in heaven for a space of a half an hour, and all the angels and the cherubim and all the heavenly hosts and everybody has been worshiping God since the beginning of history. At no other time than the book of Revelation do I know that there's silence in heaven for a half an hour. And I think, Tom, that is going to be the most, it's because it takes your breath away. All of heaven has a knowledge, because obviously those who inhabit heaven are with the King of Glory, but they have a grasp of something so beyond anything that could have been.
Pat, I watched a couple of minutes of it, and their theory was interesting. The Star Wars one, I did find that interesting. I should go and check it back out, because it was good from what I saw. It really made sense who Darth Vader is.
Compared to any of Earth's history, maybe even go beyond the pre-Adamic era. And obviously, Tom, you know, you've been a preacher. You start talking about pre-Adamic era, you talk about, you know, the post-destruction of the pre-Adamic Earth, and then the recreation of Earth and the replenishing of Earth. People just don't want to hear that. So people ask me, and I'll turn this right over to you, why this is important to salvation. Because the church wouldn't deal with it. We're now dealing with the aliens coming to save us. We're dealing with the hideous lies of Darwinism. One of the most famous paleontologists read a part of my book and said, well, that guy doesn't believe in science. And I said, oh, yes, I do. I said, I just don't believe in false science. So again, Doug, for the sake of your listeners, Tom has been on Wormwood since that event that happened in his life that he's just now recently sharing. And there's a time lock on Revelation, because the Lord spoke to me the same way and said, I will only bring it to your remembrance to share with my people as it shortly comes to pass. And what Tom just shared and I'm sharing actually gives me goosebumps, because I go, God, you are so wonderful to give a second witness. And it still blows my mind, Tom, and I'm giving it right back to you, that we never discussed our parallel paths, nor did you know the theme of Branson, the cataclysms, the entire catastrophes, biblical cataclysms. And this is what the ancients were absolutely terrified of. This is what they were absolutely writing in all their myths and legends and their observatories and their star charts, even hidden in caves in France and Spain, Altamira, Spain, and Lascaux, France. But here's the deal. The fact that you're releasing it now, Tom, the fact that I'm releasing it now, Tom, independently, I don't know, but Doug, this is blowing my mind a little bit in a good way, okay? I told the Lord, I said, always feel free, Jesus, to blow my mind, because quite candidly, it needs to be de-cobwebbed, and I want revelation from the throne. I don't want what somebody else says. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, look, you said a moment ago, what does this, people say to you, what does this kind of stuff have to do with salvation? Well, here's what I'm going to tell them. I went out on a limb in 2011. I put my reputation on the line, and I made a prediction that turned out to be absolutely right. In fact, it was more than right. Jim Baker said on his TV program, he said, it's amazing because you gave the actual date of the Pope's resignation that was a top secret in the Vatican. Nobody anywhere on the planet knew this, and you gave the exact month and year. So now, fast forward to now, and I'm telling you, people are going to understand what this has to do with salvation within just a very few years from right now, when Apophis is on a trajectory towards Earth. By that time, within 5 years from now, it'll be close enough that people with just, home but fairly sophisticated telescopes are going to be able to look into deep space and see this racing towards Earth. More and more scientists are going to come forward and say, this is going to impact Earth and there's nothing we can do about it. And within 5 years from right now, what I saw was the entire world on its face before God, begging God to deliver them. Now, will the church be ready? Don't forget what happened following 9/11 when some planes impacted the Twin Towers in New York City, and the churches across the nation were filled to capacity the day after. It only stayed that way for a few weeks as soon as they felt like, okay, the threat is gone. Then church attendance started dwindling again, and we find ourselves where we are today. That's not going to be the case in 5 years from now. By 2005, people are going to be aware that Apophis is going to impact the Earth 3.5 years later. We'll talk about some of these interesting timelines in terms of prophecy, but they're going to see that is coming, and there is nothing. NASA's own experts are in the media right now talking about this. They're saying there is nothing we can do.
Jay-Z, what's the Branson conference about, brother? What is it about?
When people get this book and they start reading it, they're going to find out that the very first chapter and the very last chapter are a fictional narrative. Now, the book is not fiction, it's nonfiction, but it starts out with a narrative that describes something similar to the opening scene of the movie Deep Impact, if you've seen that movie, where a comet.
My budget pretty much saved us.
Oh, True Legends, okay. Branson's where it's at. Gotcha.
Is hurtling towards Earth, and that could mean the end of all or much of human life, and the U.S. government and other national agencies like the ESA and so on, they're keeping the threat under wraps out of fear of public chaos that could lead to, at a minimum, martial law. But the governments of the world know that they can only keep the ruse going for so long, and that ultimately the cat is going to get out of the bag. When people read that opening chapter, they need to understand that there are parts and pieces of that chapter that are based on intelligence that was given to me from people who actually work at NASA. And I'll say more about that in a moment. And I can verify that, and I can prove that these people do work there and that I know them. But after reading chapter 1's elaborate story, people might have, I even say this in the book, you might sigh a breath of relief thinking there's no real cause for alarm because the narrative is purely fictional. And then I say, but is it? And then is when the book really starts getting down to the nitty gritty, and I'm sharing significant reasons why I've come to believe that the truth is scarier than fiction. And what I described, and Doug's had the privilege of reading it. And by the way, Skywatch TV has the book ahead of everybody else. Even Amazon doesn't have it yet. And we are doing the biggest giveaway in the history of our company. So if you want to get the book, go to skywatchtv.com, click on the link that's at the top of the page. We're giving away $900, believe it or not, in books, movies, DVDs, all this stuff for people who make a donation to get the book Wormwood from us. Why? Because I feel compelled to do anything, everything I can to get this message in the hand of as many people as is possible, in the hopes that church leaders are going to understand that this is an ominous, factual warning, and that within a few years from right now, they are going to need to begin to prepare their people for it. In fact, they should be getting ready for it right now. And so, excuse me. I also established the fact that I'm not alone in my conspiratorial thinking. I'll give you an example. Early in the book, I cite a recent peer-reviewed paper that was published in an astronomical peer-reviewed science journal. And I'm going to give you, it's a long title, but for the people that want to play the Hagman report over and over and write this down, you can go and Google this, and you can go right to the astronomical peer-reviewed publisher that put this article in print. Here's what it's called. It's called An Empirical Examination of WISE, NEO-WISE, Near-Earth Object Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, Asteroid Analysis and Results. That's actually the title. This is by the physicist Nathan Myhrvold. And Myhrvold is no Johnny. He is the former chief technology officer at Microsoft. He's a true polymath. He's a working scientist. He's published original research in paleobiology, climatology, astronomy, in all of these science peer-reviewed journals. He holds over 800 U.S. patents that have been issued to him and his corporations and affiliates. In fact, The Economist once described Myhrvold as Bill Gates' second brain, and they pointed out that he is almost always on the A-list of the world's 100 top greatest thinkers. So this is a guy to pay attention to, right? Well, guess what? He refused the asteroid data from NASA involving Apophis, but other asteroids as well, and says that their calculations are suffering, and these are some of his nicer terms, Doug and Steve. He says their calculations are suffering from, quote, systematic errors and inconsistencies regarding potentially deadly near-Earth objects, or NEOs. Now, he comes very short. People love this term right now, whistleblowers. Doug was talking about it earlier with the impeachment testimonies, right?
Oh, is she back?
Myhrvold pretty much becomes a whistleblower.
It's the second time I've had loading problems, so I'm going to reboot it. Hang on, little one, I'll let you out in a sec. Hang on. Pat, I'll go and look at the stream on my laptop. I can't do it now because the laptop's aimed at the telly. But tell Deb, if it's my fault, I'll unblock her. Pretty sure I didn't block her, but...
They're keeping the threat under wraps out of fear of public chaos that could lead to, at a minimum, martial law. But the governments of the world know that they can only keep the ruse going for so long, and that ultimately the cat is going to get out of the bag. When people read that opening chapter, they need to understand that there are parts and pieces of that chapter that are based on intelligence that was given to me from people who actually work at NASA. And I'll say more about that in a moment. And I can verify that, and I can prove that these people do work there and that I know them. But after reading chapter 1's elaborate story, people might have, I even say this in the book, you might sigh a breath of relief thinking there's no real cause for alarm because the narrative is fairly fictional. And then I say, but is it? And then is when the book really starts getting down to the nitty gritty, and I'm sharing significant reasons why I've come to believe that the truth is stranger and scarier than fiction. And what I described, and Doug's had the privilege of reading it. And by the way, Skywatch TV has the book ahead of everybody else. Even Amazon doesn't have it yet. And we are doing the biggest giveaway in the history of our company. So if you want to get the book, go to skywatchtv.com, click on the link that's at the top of the page. We're giving away $900, believe it or not, in books, movies, DVDs, all this stuff for people who make a donation to get the book Wormwood from us. Why? Because I feel compelled to do anything, everything I can to get this message in the hand of as many people as is possible, in the hopes that church leaders are going to understand that this is an ominous, factual warning, and that within a few years from right now, they are going to need to begin to prepare their people for it. In fact, they should be getting ready for it right now. And so, excuse me, I also established the fact that I'm not alone in my conspiratorial thinking. I'll give you an example. Early in the book, I cite a recent peer-reviewed paper that was published in an astronomical peer-reviewed science journal. And I'm going to give you, it's a long title, but for the people that want to play the Hagman report over and over and write this down, you can go and Google this, and you can go right to the astronomical peer-reviewed publisher that put this article in print. Here's what it's called. It's called An Empirical Examination of WISE, NEO-WISE, Near-Earth Object Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, Asteroid Analysis and Results. That's actually the title.
That's a mouthful.
This is by the physicist Nathan Myhrvold. And Myhrvold is no Johnny. He is the former chief technology officer at Microsoft. He's a true polymath. He's a working scientist. He's published original research in paleobiology, climatology, astronomy, in all of these science peer-reviewed journals. He holds over 800 U.S. patents that have been issued to him and his corporations and affiliates. In fact, The Economist once described Myhrvold as Bill Gates' second brain, and they pointed out that he is almost always on the A-list of the world's 100 top greatest thinkers. So this is a guy to pay attention to, right? Well, guess what? He refused the asteroid data from NASA involving Apophis, but other asteroids as well, and says that their calculations are suffering, and these are some of his nicer terms, Doug and Steve. He says their calculations are suffering from, quote, systematic errors and inconsistencies regarding potentially deadly near-Earth objects, or NEOs. Now, he comes very short. People love this term right now, whistleblowers. Doug was talking about it earlier with the impeachment testimonies, right? Well, Myhrvold pretty much becomes a whistleblower in this article, and he charges that NASA has deliberately, that's his word, deliberately misreported the number of threats by near-Earth objects being tracked by the NEO-WISE project. He accuses the scientists over there at the Space Agency of behaving, again, his words, extremely deceptively with deliberate scientific misconduct in a cover-up of a very real and potentially imminent space threat. Here's a quote. The very NASA managers who should have been supervising the project were more interested in protecting it from scrutiny and the issues that I am calling misconduct. Now get what he says here. The issues that I am calling misconduct in the NEO-WISE papers were not inadvertent. In other words, they're not a mistake. They're intentional. They appear to have been deliberate choices made repeatedly by the NEO-WISE team over a long period of time, and these actions have caused the astronomical community to work under the false belief that the NEO-WISE results are accurate, more so than what the evidence warrants. Anyway, he goes on, and I encourage people, go and read his paper, because this is a man that deserves your attention. He is one of the top 100 critical thinkers in the world, and he is literally saying that NASA and their NEO-WISE team are covering up the fact that there is a far greater threat of impact with Apophis and also some other asteroids that he talks about than what they are admitting. So, in other words, ladies and gentlemen, Mirabel's findings suggest that the largest database in the world, Steve, more than all other sources combined of information, detailing diameter, albedo, pi calculations, properties of over 164,000 asteroids, he says, is intentionally suffering from manipulated information at worst and inadequate analysis at best. And the net result is that the public is being kept in the dark regarding a potentially imminent threat. So it's not just Tom Horn. There are other examples in the book. I talk about Harry Lehr, who's also a scientist, a mathematician. He's written letters to Donald Trump encouraging him to please have U.S. government scientists cross-check the calculations immediately, even though he ends this dispatch to President Trump with an ominous admonition that we're already out of time anyway, but it would be better for the public to know what's coming than not to know, so that they can make their own individual preparations for essentially what he thinks is the end of the world. And by the way, you might have noticed, like in the UK press, NASA employee Robert Frost. Again, people can Google and watch his interviews over there. He said the best thing the government can do if these mathematicians and scientists that are mentioned in my book, The Wormwood Prophecy, if they're correct, he said the best thing they can do is tell the public, hunker down, pass out Bibles, and learn how to pray.
Well, I think that's very good. And, I mean, when I say very good, what else can we do, Doug? And, and thank you for giving Tom and I and others the platform you've given us over these years to warn, to admonish, to encourage, to talk about, to share testimonies, to show that God's in this thing, that God will always give a second witness. And the bottom line is quite candidly, and then before we even get there, Tom, the Cascadia region, and I'm not just putting this in because it's the hot button right now, the earth changes are becoming so problematic, and they precede Wormwood and the loss of life just on the West Coast. And again, it's the West Coast. And for your record, Tom, my scientist friend is running a lot of the, like I said, the trajectory regressions, etc. And I'll give you that data because it basically confirms, but it looks like on preliminary, it's going to hit pretty much, and I'm talking about now Wormwood. He said they're trying to sort the data now. And by the way, these are not, laptop computers or, something. These exist only in the most uttermost secret parts of the world. And this man has had multiple death threats and attempts on his life, even as long as, or as short as 90 days ago. So what you just quoted in the experts you quoted, that you're dealing that they know what's going on, and they call it extinction level events. But again, isn't it fascinating that the overwhelming concern is that they keep everything under wraps? And by the way, there's a reason why Elon Musk, there's a reason why Richard Branson, and Jeff Bezos are all planning to use their billions or however much, hundreds of billions to head off planet. And concurrently with this, I want you to see something here, ladies and gentlemen. The narratives of history, mythology, and legends, and even the book of Enoch, the fallen angels knew what was going to happen. The giants were their offspring. They wanted to save their offspring, their children, if you will. And so the passage in Obadiah becomes even more, I guess you'd say, prominent and reflective in that, though you set your nest amongst the stars, yet will I bring thee down. I would say this: there have been so many disaster movies where the elite are always building to get off the planet before be saved in it before these events come to pass. And what's fabulous, and I think this is fabulous, is we know, whether it's Armageddon, whether we know it's any of the, the disaster movies, et cetera, that are out prepping the minds of people, that common thread is that the elite believe somehow they will escape it all. Don't you find that kind of curious?
Well, yeah, they're absolutely believing the lie of the devil, and they are making preparations. Underground facilities all the way back to, President Reagan where they started funding these different, what was it? It was called Project Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Where they started putting in these underground facilities with years and years worth of food, because they know that this is coming, and they know, by the way, when it impacts the earth, the other things that it's going to set in motion. There was an article, on the internet this week that says, what if the Apophis, what if that asteroid strikes the Yellowstone super volcano? I mean, so your mind can go to all kinds of places, and that is what these different scientists are looking at and what they're talking about. And NASA is currently saying that it's ironic, really. They're saying Apophis is probably not going to hit the Earth, but it's going to come so close that it's going to knock out the satellites that are in orbit around this planet. Well, there are so many different things that can influence the trajectory of a rock like Apophis. We know it's got to travel tens of thousands of miles through space before its close encounter with the Earth. By the way, Friday the 13th, April 2029 is when it is. I'm going to tell you, Tom Horn, that is when this rock is going to impact the Earth. NASA's saying, we hope it don't. We don't think it will. But it's got to travel tens of thousands of miles through space. There's all kinds of stuff and debris that it's got to pass by. There's even a Russian scientist said that photons from the sun bouncing off of Apophis are going to nudge its trajectory in such a way that it'll impact the Earth. I mean, there's a lot of scientists out there right now that realize, including Mirabal, but others, they realize that NASA is playing a game here. They're involved in a cover-up on purpose because they don't want the world to be in a panic. Now, by the way, I don't like being the agent of information that is negative. I don't deal in fear. I'm not trying to scare people, but I am telling you, and I'm not lifting myself up either, but I have been correct in the past on these uncanny predictions. And I'm telling you, this one is more vivid than anything ever. And I'm once again going out on a limb. And I'm telling you that this is going to happen. Now, assume for a moment that Apophis is biblical wormwood. Revelation chapter 8. And I'm not a date setter. I don't do any of those things. I'm just saying, assume for the moment that that is true. And that 2029, therefore, represents a period. Doug, are we going to go to a commercial break?
Let's just keep going, Tom, as opposed to, I will say this. So folks, you're listening to the Hagman Report right here on the Global Star Radio Network today, Thursday, November 21st, 2019, HagmanReport.com and HagmanReportLive.com. Folks, we're talking to Steve Quayle and Tom Horn. Steve Quayle, SteveQuayle.com, and Tom Horn, SkywatchTV.com. The links will be in the Hagman Report Live program description box. Go ahead and continue, Tom.
Yeah, so if Apophis is biblical wormwood, which I am convinced that it is, and that 2029, therefore, would represent a period sometime around the middle of the Great Tribulation period, if you're a dispensational Christian and you're listening to this, and that's most of evangelical Christianity, though not all, who do believe that there is a coming period of time called the Great Tribulation period that lasts 7 years. If 2029 is when Apophis / wormwood impacts the Earth, the trumpet judgment happened, most Bible scholars agree, somewhere in the middle of the Great Tribulation period. So what would that mean? If 2029 represents a period around the middle of the Great Tribulation period when the trumpet judgments begin, then back up. So take these dates. You can do this math yourself. April the 13th, 2029, and back up exactly 3.5 years, 3.5 years from the middle of the tribulation period. That's going to bring you forward to Monday, October 13th, 2025. So that's April 13, 2029 minus 3.5 years exactly. And guess what? That's going to bring you to the start date for the dreaded 7 years of tribulation in October 13, 2025. So basically 5 years from right now. Now, for evangelical dispensationalists, that timing would be an ominous sign.
Yeah, not without God.
involving both the
Pat,
Great
I'm a
Tribulation
Guido, not without God. I'm not doing it without His protection. I'm not volunteering to stay back and take him on my own. I'm only doing it if He's watching my back.
also the idea of a rapture. Now, there are three main ideas involving the rapture: a pre-tribulation rapture, a pre-wrath, or what some people call a mid-tribulation rapture, and then a post-tribulation rapture. Now, watch this. Depending on your particular position, that would place the last possible date for a pre-tribulation rapture, and I know that many of the listeners to this program don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, and that's not anything I'm arguing, but I'm just saying, note these dates. The last possible date for a pre-tribulation rapture would then happen around October 13, 2025, and guess what that is on the Jewish calendar? That is the Feast of Tabernacles, and 2 weeks earlier, Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets, when the shofar is blown 100 times. Now, why is that interesting? Because the Feast of Tabernacles for the Christian community represents the covenant people of God in their dwellings, in their tents. Jesus says, "I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am there you may be also." If it were not so, I would have told you so. So a rapture occurs, and then the people of God are surrounding the Holy of Holies in heaven. That's the Feast of Tabernacles for Christians. A few days before that, the Feast of Trumpets, when the shofar.
Yeah, Jay-Z, it's the only general I'll follow, Christ. He's the only boss I'll follow.
During the Feast of Trumpets. Why?
Unless it's Michael under Christ's instructions.
1 Corinthians 15, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, he said to the Thessalonians, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command," or a shout, "with the voice of the archangel, with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first." This all happens following the sounding of a trumpet. So Bible expositors believe, whether it's mid-trib, pre-trib, whatever, they believe that a rapture of the covenant people of God is going to happen during the Rosh Hashanah, during the Feast of Trumpets. Now, keep in mind that October 13, 2025, the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, is only not even 6 years from now. So now, if a person is a pre-wrath rapture believer, and they believe that a rapture is going to happen sometime around the middle of the tribulation period, and if in fact Wormwood is Apophis, which Tom Horn is certifying. Doug's not saying that. Steve's not saying that. Tom Horn is telling you that this is a fact. Believe me or don't believe me, I'm going out on a limb. But if I'm right, then for pre-wrath believers, that would represent a departure from earth just before April 2029, which is 1 week after Passover. And of course, Passover is very important to Christian believers. It represents when the angel, the firstborn judgment, the firstborn die in the book of Exodus, and the angel of God passes over the Israelite homes that are marked on the doorpost with the blood of a lamb, and that symbolizes God protecting his own even during the time of judgments. And don't forget, there's several examples in the book of Revelation where the judgments are being poured out, and God says, "See that you do not touch those." The judgment is ordered. The plague is ordered. Do not touch those that belong to me. Do not touch those that have the seal of God in their forehead. So I find that to be intriguing. And then finally, in a post-tribulation rapture, it turns out to be Wednesday, October 13, 2032, the week following the Feast of Tabernacles. So it is ironic that regardless of your point of view, you could look at this if you're a pre-trib, mid-trib, or after the trib rapture believer, that all three of those days as they are connected to April the 13th, 2029, all three of them fall right on top of these very, very specific and important Jewish holidays that are connected for the Christian community with the future redemption of the covenant people of God. I found that when I was reading that, it put cold chills on my back to think, okay, maybe this is a coincidence, but this seems to be extraordinary.
Well, I think too, and here's something, I think, Tom, probably one of the problems with and I'm not going to argue, I am not a pre-tribulation guy, but
right.
What I am saying is prior to that time, there's going to be so many events that are absolutely, how should I say this? They're building to a crescendo. When Jesus said there's going to be, signs in the heavens, sun, moon, and stars, that there's going to be quakes in diverse places. Before the total, I would say this, the total revelation of what's happened, the idea is that Satan must do his best to rid the planet of all true believers in the living God. Why? Because his design is to destroy. Satan knows what provokes God to wrath, and he's doing it all the time. So I think people need to understand something, that given all of these, if you will, the catastrophes that have happened in the past, and the coming catastrophes that are coming in the future, the ancient cataclysms, and even obviously when Solon, Atlantis, if you will, narrative by Plato, when he went to the Sais, S-A-I-S, some people pronounce just say, at the mouth of the Egyptian Nile, in the area where the great Alexandrian library was destroyed, the most interesting and compelling statement that this Sanchi, that's the name of the high priest, makes to Solon. He said, when it comes to catastrophes and cataclysms, I'm paraphrasing, you Greeks are but children, for there is not an old man among you that knows the true history of the earth. And he says in one version of that there have been catastrophes and will be catastrophes, and that the earth has been rid, or has had its, if you will, former civilizations destroyed only for new ones to rise. Now, why is this important? Because this year at a conference, there's a battle, Tom. Some people, by the way, I've gotten such incredible hate mail. The argument over can there be a pre-Adamic era and a post-pre-Adamic era in which God recreates the world, it's not either or. Yes, it can. Both those issues are absolutely biblical, and you can maintain them both. And so, this year, again, it's July 10th and 12th, the pre-Adamic era and the return of the days of Noah. So I think we're seeing it already. The beginning of sorrows and troubles are here. We're seeing the return of the ancient gods. You and I have done, half a dozen shows, and more than that, but over the last years, talking about the return of the ancient gods. We're seeing now the embellishment of idol worship, the statue of Moloch being not only at the Bohemian Grove in San Francisco, or actually in California, Northern California, but also, if you will, the enthronement of Moloch at the front of the Colosseum. That isn't by mistake they put it there. Obviously, I think the underlying meaning of that is so obvious. We burned your babies, and guess what? You Christians are next into the Colosseum. Now, I really want people to understand, this year at Branson, we have speakers that have never spoken at any of my conferences, and one of them, Gary Wayne, very, very well-researched author, Carl Teitgrib, and we're going to have some stuff happening this year that's going to be like anything else we've ever done, and each year it gets better and better. But here's the deal. July in Branson is the busiest month of the busiest month of the year, so we encourage people to go to gen6.com. And Tom, you are the king of giveaways, but what we're doing for anybody who orders the 2020 DVDs, they get all the True Legends DVDs, and we ship that ahead of time, of course, because I want people to understand there is nothing new under the sun. And the fact that you just laid out, Tom Horn, the lying, if you will, disinformative twisting of the truth, that even one of the 100 smartest guys in the world is saying, and by the way, my guy is in that category too, but for his sake, and he's really, really, really famous, but I can't in good conscience put his name out there and have him killed. I just can't do it. And by the grace of God, the Lord is protecting him. I'm not, but I take this seriously. And so again, ladies and gentlemen, go on Gen6, GENSIX.com, and please sign up. And this is something very important. What Tom Horn has laid out to you today, what I'm laying out, and Tom, when you went to the Vatican, I'm going to ask you to go visit that, because here's what I got in the last 48 hours. I asked about the clustering of the ships that you spoke to, and they said they had to wait. The Vatican astronomers, sometimes the field of view is so cluttered with flying objects, they have to wait. I think it was up to, an hour for the field of view? Do you believe that obviously the Vatican knows specifically where the location of Apophis is coming from? Because number one, they have their secret services with Satan, and number two, that co-equally with their concern for that, has there ever been a mention to them? Are they how do I say this? Are they trying to track all this stuff so they can beat everyone else to the microphone in the world's press with the statement that we have been in contact with the space brothers, our space creators? At what point does Mount Graham and all the research you guys did there, and all of the announcements and everything you were told there and shown there, Lucifer Telescope, does that not to you, or forgive me, what does that say to you now in light of the revelation you're having on Apophis, and where's the linkage? Help me to understand. I know there's linkage. I'm just trying to put it into your perspective, because I've never been to Mount Graham and you have.
Yeah, so let me ask you first, though, Steve, your conference. People go to Gen6, GENSIX.com. Is the conference in Branson? It's going to be held in the summer. Is it at the Palace Theater?
No, it's still at the mansion in Branson.
No, that's what I meant. Yeah. So you can accommodate about 2,800 people. Your event has sold out every year, so I would really encourage people to register as soon as possible. As a matter of fact, I've already invited Steve, and a couple of weeks from now, he's going to come to Missouri, and we're going to record some programs around the conference and the DVD set that he's giving away when you register for the conference. So we're going to record some programs around that. I couldn't more. And by the way, people who know me know that I don't have people come on the program where Tom Horn sits down with them on television and promotes their conference. I only do. We have our own conference, but this is involving Steve. In fact, our conference is already sold out, so don't even think about it. But we're going to be promoting Steve's conference. You need to be there. Catastrophism. And even though I might attend, because I'm not going to speak, but I might attend because your daughter, Stephanie, holy cow, she is getting so much attention from Nashville right now. She's being called one of the big up-and-comers. And she's going to be doing a concert, right?
Yep, she's going to be doing a concert on Thursday night, registration. And obviously it's covered in the registration. So, she's a very, very lovely young lady. And because we're talking about ancient cataclysms and coming catastrophes, her concert is not related to that. So those of you who have ever had a chance to see her perform, I mean, it's pretty amazing. When you go on different websites, and she was just at the CMA, she was on the red carpet. She's in a gorgeous green emerald dress, and then she goes out and plays with her band, doesn't change clothes. And the young lady really has an amazing, she's doing her thing. And I could tell you stories about the word of the Lord given. I can tell you about the time that Stephanie's life was in danger, and Romy Zarek literally prayed her out of a flaming cockpit prior to the cockpit flaming. And I can tell you miracle after miracle. So what's interesting is that, I like country music, and it's kind of more contemporary country. But the fact is I want to share a beautiful time for everybody on Thursday night, because usually everybody registers and goes back to the hotel. She'll probably be giving a 90-minute concert. Her band is good, and you know this, Tom. Your son Joe, in my opinion, is one of the finest guitarists out there, and I mean literally. And you can't find better musicians, in my opinion, than in Nashville, Tennessee. The world's who's who, even people that are super famous, they go there to continue on, because when you're talking about sessions players, and for instance, Glenn Campbell was considered one of the greatest session player guitarists in the history of Nashville, and others who have been appreciating that. And I just want to give something kind of fun for everyone. So again, ladies and gentlemen, gen6.com, you register for that, and
Look, Jay-Z, there's your True Legends conference. Is that the one you're going to?
By the grace of God, she's
there. It
is.
Committed,
that must and be I'm excited to share her experience in country music with everyone, and I think it'll be a refreshing time. Give your mind a break until we get into the heavy stuff the following 2 days.
Well, it's going to be a blast, and Nita and I are planning to be there for that. We, of course, have had the privilege of seeing Stephanie, but only in YouTube videos, and when she was at Nashville, and she was on the CMA, and we the Country Music Association walk, and we've had the opportunity to be able to see that, and folks, if you're listening to this program, Steve and I have jabbed at each other in the past and said, how in the world did we ever produce such enormously talented kids? We don't know, but we thank God for it, and that's going to be just a little add-on. That's like a little freebie. If you register to be at the conference, Gen 6, go there, register. You're going to get some free stuff when you register, but you're also going to get to be there when Stephanie, Steve Coyle's daughter, who is an up-and-coming, a rising star in Nashville, and she really is. That's not hyperbole. She is literally on the verge of a breakthrough into the mainstream in country music, and so we couldn't be happier for her and Steve. But that's going to be just like a little added freebie. You get to go, you're going to see this concert, you're going to get to be part of that, and then of course the next morning everything starts. And Steve, so here's the thing. You asked me about Mount Graham and all that, and I still recall the day that Chris Putnam and I went there, asking the Jesuit astronomer who was on duty that day. We asked him all kinds of really pointed questions. Really, I mean, we asked him, Father Malachi Martin, what was he talking about with Mount Graham and what he told Art Bell. I mean, we asked him all kinds of questions, but he admitted to us that day. And this goes to your last conference in Branson, which I think, did you say people can get those DVDs free if they register for the new one? But your last one.
Yeah, no. The free DVDs they get when they register for video on demand, they get last year's conference free. But when they register for pre-buying our DVDs, and Tom, we spend huge money on the DVDs. Then they get all the True Legends DVDs, which fits in nicely with this ancient cataclysm catastrophe. So I want this to be a saturation course on real history, and where Christians will not have to back down on anything, because we will be engaged in a fighting the good fight of faith, but also knowing how to give the right answer to the people that God brings across our path. Having answers with a very good understanding is a wonderful way to share our faith with people that don't share it at the point.
Well, that's wild. Okay, so that's a fabulous giveaway. If people go there, they register for the conference, and they can also buy the live streaming. But you asked me about Mount Graham, and it made me think about the conference that you did 2019, the videos that are available now through your website, because we were, and us, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but when we're doing these interviews, we just get in people's face. And that's what we did with all respect. I mean, we were nice, but we didn't hold back anything in our conversation with the Jesuit astronomer at Mount Graham. And when we asked him about the advanced technology telescope that the Vatican has there, he was straightforward. And he said that the only thing that they use, the advanced technology telescope that the Vatican owns at Mount Graham, he said the only thing they use it for today is monitoring exo-worlds on which they believe the possibility of extraterrestrial, highly intelligent, not microbes, advanced extraterrestrial intelligence exists. He blew us away. When he told us that, we were just blown away. Of course, we were blown away several times that day with some of the stuff that they were just so freely talking about up there at Mount Graham. But it reminded me very much of what you're saying tonight about the planet Rahab, and what I'm telling you I've been told about what is coming by 2025. I'm telling you, the world is going to be on its knees. Now, and I know, we've got maybe 40 minutes left or something, so let me do this real quickly. I have a friend who has another friend that is aware of me, but there's only one of these guys that I really know personally. We've spent time together physically, not just on the internet or on the phone. And he is a senior advanced flight specialist that works in NASA. Now, I can't say his name, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And when you're out here in Missouri and we're doing these shows, if you ask me privately, I'll tell you who it is. And Derek and Sharon met him because he came to the Branson conference this last year, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But I asked him, and I asked some other people that have above top secret security clearances. I talk about some of this in the book, and I can prove everything that I'm saying. So this is not Tom Horn trying to, hype something. But I asked them to read the 8th chapter of the book of Revelation and tell me, as astronomers with degrees that work in NASA, what they think they're seeing there. And I include this information in the book. It's very interesting because they told me that the details there, Revelation chapter 8, that the details match the sequence of either a binary asteroid, which just simply means basically two very large rocks that are caught in each other's gravitational field and they're traveling together. So a binary asteroid that are stuck in their barycenter, or a single large asteroid that breaks apart as it is entering into Earth's magnetic field. What's what they said? This is what they told me. If you read the book of Revelation, chapter 8, note what they say. Revelation 8, 6 through 7. And by the way, in the same order. So exactly in the same order as it is laid out in the scripture. Revelation 8, 6 through 7, it says, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Revelation 8, 6 through 7. Here's what they told me. Aside from the obvious correlation to the 7th plague of the Exodus, hell and fire being cast on the earth, scorching and setting ablaze fields and forests, they said this easily matches the first smaller portions of an incoming binary asteroid detached from a larger space body on impact with the atmosphere. Alternatively, these meteor fragments or asteroid fragments could be debris caught in the gravitational pull of a larger single asteroid which entered Earth's atmosphere ahead of the colossal rock. Now, pay attention to what the very next 2 verses say and what they told me. The very next 2 verses. And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood, And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. That's Revelation 8 through 9. So here's what they said. Immediately following this first trumpet, with what is believed to be its smaller portions of red-hot fragmented asteroid materials, now a picture emerges of a larger, what's called a burning mountain. And by the way, that's exactly how I or ancients would convey seeing a sizable asteroid as it passes through the atmosphere towards this planet. It would come across as just a large burning mountain. It makes perfect sense that that is what the prophet saw. But it impacts the sea. It kills the third part of that ocean's life. It wipes out ships with tidal activity. And that appears to be the first of two larger parts of either a binary asteroid or a massive disintegrating asteroid as it enters our atmosphere. Now watch what happens directly following this. And I guarantee you, you have never heard Revelation 8 described in this way. That each of these succinctly in exactly the way the prophet described them. Now watch what happens following this when the next trumpet sounds. Now we're at Revelation 8, 10 through 11. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star, again, Greek asteroid, the name of the asteroid is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter, Revelation 8, 10 through 11. But the third trumpet details what sounds like the second gigantic asteroid fragment, I was told, burning like a lamp, exactly, again, how John on Patmos would likely have explained a massive asteroid section blazing towards the earth, which immediately impacts another part of the earth. So one of them impacts the ocean, one of them hits ground, causing tributaries to become polluted or something like that, including waters normally purified for drinking. And I've come up with 6 ways in which wormwood could pollute enough water on Earth to cause the third part of the Earth to be contaminated and people everywhere to die. And now finally, look at what this sequential description ends with in Revelation 8:12. Here's what it says. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise, Revelation 8:10. So my scientist friends, astronomers, on reading those successive verses, ending with verse 12, explained how, as a result of a terrifying 1-2 punch of asteroid components plunging into the ocean and upon land, a sequence of tsunamis measuring hundreds of feet into the air would slam coastal terrains around the world, infusing the atmosphere with scorched aerosol particles, leading to extreme heat in the Earth's atmosphere and a subsequent cascade of high-velocity hurricanes worldwide, combined with voluminous debris hurled into the sky from the initial impact and volcanic eruption reactions. For about a week, darkness would cover the sky, blacking out much of the light from the heavenly bodies, fulfilling Revelation 8:12, and in fact, that's exactly what Los Alamos National archaeologist James Massey says unfolded. He believes at the same time in the time of Noah's flood, but exactly as what's going to happen in Revelation chapter 8, where it describes the wormwood impact, followed up by days of darkness. Steve, years ago, I was in McMinnville, Oregon, and I was in a factory there. And somebody came in and they said, Mount St. Helens just exploded. And I remember going out into the parking lot, and from McMinnville, Oregon, I looked towards Washington. and what looked like literally a nuclear warhead with the full-on mushroom cloud, the whole thing. It was, of course, the top of Mount St. Helens, but it looked like a nuclear explosion. I went home that day. The next day, I got up in the morning, going to drive to work, and darkness had settled upon all the earth as I could perceive it. The sun, the moon, the morning stars, everything had been darkened out. And I learned, of course, as I walked outside, ash from Mount St. Helens had filled the atmosphere. It had been picked up by the atmospheric systems, the what do they call it?
The winds aloft in the upper atmosphere.
Right. It had moved all this debris. In fact, this stuff showed up all over the world. It was overseas. It was everywhere.
Yep.
But for several days, it caused us to be under darkness. And that debris fell down upon the earth. So I remember seeing physically just really a small sample of what these astronomers told me is going to happen when Apophis, Friday the 13th, April 2029, impacts the earth.
Well, I think that's what I'm trying to get everyone to recognize, that prior to that, you talk about a 1-2 punch. And I believe, Tom, that right now, and I've been working on that film for 6 months. It's in post-production right now. We'll have it available on Vimeo. By the way, I think I'm going on Coast to Coast tonight. Yeah, I am. After, whatever, 10 to or 11 to 1 o'clock my time in the evening. But I'm going to be talking about Cascadia, the big one, because most people, and wrongly so, on Yellowstone, we interviewed the smartest people on the planet on Yellowstone. They said Yellowstone's chance of eruption is 0.00001. The Cascadia volcanoes, of which there are 18, all active. That doesn't mean they're all smoking yet, but the magma pools under them are very active. He said that's 1 in 3. 1 in 3. There's a blackout, pun intended. There's a information moratorium where even the USGS, these guys have instruments that are, pun intended, almost out of this world. At least they're in outer space, many of them. And they're gagged from telling people, for instance, when the Ridgecrest earthquake happened in 7.1 back in July 4th, 5th, since then there have been 1.3 million measurable earthquakes, but they're not talking about the micro tremors. Long period episodic quakes lead to massive volcanic explosions. So China Lake, the U.S. Naval Weapons Laboratory that was both above ground and underground in China Lake in the Ridgecrest, California area, is totally destroyed. But what came to light is that there's a 275 cubic mile magma pool that is now moving towards the coast. Tom, since Ridgecrest happened for the first time in history, there have been almost 400 NASA flights using everything from U-2s, spy planes, the former U-2 spy plane, set up with new instruments, flying up and down the West Coast, flying over into Idaho and the craters of the moon, flying in every volcanic hotspot. And by the way, the U-2 that flew over Yellowstone didn't have a tail number. That man was one of the intelligence agencies. But here's the astonishing thing. The astonishing thing is, in talking to all the scientists and I don't know if you've seen the trailer yet, but they're all into the same statement. When people in America hear the word volcano, they jump right to Yellowstone, the super volcano, because obviously that's what that movie was about, that what's his name, Emmerich made on Woody Harrelson being the Jesus freak telephone guy or radio guy. Gee, I wonder where he got that. But the point is that we're now watching the events take place in Cascadia. There's a lady named Catherine Schultz who wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning story I posted 3 times on my website about Cascadia, the big one. And they're talking about full margin rupture. If that happens, they're talking about, they say up to a 10.2 earthquake. That's what they said publicly. They're talking everyone west of Interstate 5 will die. I think that's 9 million people. So the thing is that the reason, now here's an answer to everybody. Well, why wouldn't they tell you that? Because of the one word that starts with an I, insurance. Most people do not understand that it's an insurance issue. And California is a good example because a lot of the former insurance companies that are carrying fire insurance after last year's fires, before this year's fires, aren't carrying them anymore. Well, when you have hazard insurance that won't cover your mortgage, guess what? You can't sell your house if you have a mortgage on it unless the banks are benevolent. They can call that mortgage. So the whole reason for not warning people is financial. But getting back to Cascadia, the big one, we flew over every single volcano in that range, from southern British Columbia down to Mount Shasta, over to Mount Lassen, everything from Mount Rainier, Mount Hood. Mount Hood, by the way, has no active seismic sensors, yet it's one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the United States. So what I'm saying is this, that what people don't understand, and I think it's, according to my sources, it's within the next couple of years, there's going to be a preview of wormwood happening. Now, the average time period of volcanic ash in the upper atmosphere that swirls the globe is right about 4 years. So the sun turning to darkness, the moon turning to blood, you see the moon turning to blood when obviously you've got forest fires. But what people don't understand is that affects growing season. It brings about famine. And so not only is Tom saying, look, he's just...
No, Pat, things go quiet when it's interesting.
I'm always with you.
Guys, here's something he doesn't know. That in the last 50 years, the United States has got 2 billion less birds than it had 50 years ago. The United States has lost 2 billion birds since, I don't know, probably the 60s. That's taking our food supply, guys.
Meaning that. So the point is that today I think it's kind of a unique thing, Tom, because we're giving a double witness. Never before did you and I talk to this off radio. When I was in Branson, the last time I was there, we didn't talk about this stuff. And I didn't even know you have a new book out until I saw it on your website. But the point is that that's what I'm trying to tell people. God will always provide a secondary witness. Now, here's the people's responsibility that are taking this to the Lord in prayer. It affects your decisions on what you're going to do with your money. Are you going to leave it to your kids? Well, what happens when there's no money and there's nothing to leave because a third of the people are going to die? And so that's Bible. And I had a friend, you'll appreciate this. He was kicked out of a Bible study when he even brought up the 2 witnesses, the Antichrist, and the whole thing, prophecy. And I'm going to ask you this, Tom. Why is it that prophecy, biblical prophecy, the words of Jesus, obviously all the prophets, major and minor, Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zechariah, Obadiah, Amos, Nahum, all of them, and Jesus himself being the chief prophet. Why is it that it's so scary to people, in your opinion? You're a pastor. You and I both came out of the same, Assembly of God, and I'm not bad-mouthing them. I'm just saying that they're sure not interested in hearing this stuff. So what is it? Can I ask you that? Because that's a question that my friend was asking me today. Why will you be kicked out if you even ask about prophecy? You know what they told him? Talking about the 2 witnesses, they said he was a fearmonger and his presence was no more welcome.
Yeah, so look, I get this. I was an executive, actually, in the Assemblies of God for decades. I was a pastor for 25 years. So you and I both have history in this organization. I can tell you that a lot of people in the Assemblies of God don't like the suppression of prophetic teaching, but it's there. And so even, like you're seeing Congress divided today, the same thing is true in these institutions, where on the one hand you have people that are prophecy believers, others that are not prophetic voices. Steve, but when you mention this Cascadia thing, I got to say something, because when I saw what I saw, and let me look again, I want to say this to the Hagman listeners, if Doug is okay with this. If you have never purchased anything by Tom Horn and Stephen Quayle, make an exception this one time. Do these 2 things. Go to skywatchtv.com. You'll see a video on the top of the website, and right below it, a link into the store. we're giving away $900. I know that sounds insane, right? But $900 in free product when you make a donation of $35 and you get the Wormwood book. We're doing that because I'm doing everything within my power to put this book in the hands of people. We can only cover so much information on a radio program. There is tons of information. You need to know it, and you're going to really need to know it and be ready for it within just a few years from right now. The second thing you need to do, go to Gen6, GENSIX.com, register to be in Steve Quayle's conference. I don't really know, Steve, Doug. I don't know how many more opportunities we're going to have. I'm telling you right now that the doo-doo is getting ready to hit the fan, and people's hearts are going to fail them for fear. Look at what Luke, I'm sitting right here looking at this as I'm talking to you. Look at what Luke 21, 25 through 28 says. It says, and there shall be signs, Steve said this a moment ago, in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, that is the word asteroids. There will be signs in the asteroids, and upon the earth, distress of nations. That is what I saw in my vision. Distress of nations with perplexity. That is what I saw. People on their faces around the world screaming to God to save them from what is coming upon the earth. The seas and the waves roaring. Look at what it says. Men's hearts failing them for fear, for seeing those things that are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Now here is a word. But then, and I love this part, right? Luke 21, 25 through 8. But then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, 2025, I guarantee you, then look up, lift up your head, for your redemption is drawing nigh. Now here's the deal, Steve. You mentioned Cascadia. When I saw what I did, and I woke up, and I went in, and I started reading about everything about Apopus and how NASA and everybody else was saying it's going to impact the Earth in 2029, and then they started covering it up, and I'm wanting to know why. Of course, I reached out, and I don't know if we'll have time. If we get time, I'll talk about it. I reached out to friends that I have who are senior flight analysts in NASA, for crying out loud. And I can prove that. So I'm not making up stuff here. When I saw all that was being said, and I was startled how much it reflected what I had seen, one of the questions I had, Steve, was how does Wormwood, if it is Apopus? So, by the way, I reached out to, through Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis at the Pentagon, I reached out and said, hey, can you put me in contact with an impact specialist? I have questions. Kind of the same thing, Steve, you've been doing with your friend that is an expert who can retro, analyze when these asteroids impacted Earth, where they came from, what their trajectory was. I reached out and I said, can you tell me if an asteroid, the size, weight, capacity, all that of Apopus impacted the Earth, where would it have to impact the Earth in order to be able to do X, Y, Z to contaminate a third of the waters on the Earth? So I had real questions about that. But what I found was where I started out thinking, okay, so Apopus, it's going to impact, it's going to break apart, or it's a binary asteroid. It's going to impact part of the Earth, part of the sea. It winds up contaminating all this water. Scientific reality in which that could happen. That was my question. How could that actually happen? And of course, oh my gosh, I didn't even know. Part of it has to do with what you're saying about Cascadia. So let me just very quickly say this. I know we're going to run out of time here in like 17 minutes. It's ironic, but I was pointed back to the old 1969 techno thriller by Michael Crichton called The Andromeda Strain. Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
So you have this, it's a team of scientists, and they're investigating an outbreak of a deadly extraterrestrial microorganism in Arizona, and everybody in Piedmont, Arizona is dead. But they go there wanting to know, why are all these people dying? Well, it turns out that there was a secret project by the government where they sent a satellite up into space and it's collecting microorganisms out of the upper atmosphere for a bioweapons project. But it picks up a microorganism that then when it falls to the earth, this thing, it kills people almost instantaneously through blood clotting. So I was pointed to that to say, what if Apophis is carrying a microorganism in which it is hosting a virus? And when it impacts the earth and the waters of the sea are boiling and all that, it becomes aerated, it goes up into the upper atmosphere, spread all around the world. But it is a microorganism. This sounds very much actually like some of the stuff you guys were covering in your conference in 2019 that people can get now through you free. They go over to gym6.com.
Good night, Pat.
But
Sleep well, brother.
it could rain down upon the earth the contamination that both pollutes the waters, but also people just breathing. Now, why did I mention Cascadia? Because I actually wound up with like 5 major ways in which Apophis, wormwood, could impact the waters and breathable air and all that would cause so many people around the world to die. So here was one of the other theories, and now I'm bringing this to Cascadia. Should that happen, and I'm telling you it's going to, the aftermath could produce a crack in the Eurasian tectonic plate that causes a split in the continent holding Europe and Asia that's going to launch a series of volatile volcanic eruptions. And by the way, it wouldn't even have to split the continent. It's going to do that anyway. Is that Cascadia, a series of volatile volcanic eruptions? I'm actually just reading notes from the people at NASA told me that could subsequently unleash a massive quantity of poisonous, sulfurous gases that would impact the waterways in an uncontainable manner, creating a ripple effect throughout the entire world. And as a byproduct, hundreds of millions of people around the globe die, and our future crop seasons are greatly impacted, blah, blah, blah. I'm just reading notes, by the way, from the guys at NASA. Steve, does that seem to resonate with what you're saying about Cascadia?
Yeah, it does, because I want to share something. You mentioned Mount St. Helens, and Tom, that ash plume reached 101,000 feet. Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines reached 147,600 feet. Well, you can do the math. One's sub 19 miles high. And look, if I'm off, I'm doing it quick and dirty in my head. And I don't have an adding machine. And, the other one is 29 miles. But what's fascinating is Mount Pinatubo sits on what they call the wedge, which is a Pacific plate that's driving in to the North American plate and affects the plates off of Washington, Oregon, and California called the Juan de Fuca plate. And that's the biggest one, but it's all part of the Farallon plate. But here's the deal. I'm having, and I will share the findings with you, the asteroid strike that we're talking about, the 3 highest at this point probabilities, and there's a reason I'll share it with you, Tom, but I'm not going to share it publicly yet. And that's just fair. We do our research, so we can do that. But the point is that the Western Pacific seems to be the hot spot, because in the Western Pacific, between Midway Island and